Hey, welcome back to my channel. So today you're gonna learn how to create a perfect circle using nothing but a piece of paper, pencil, and your hand. Also, I'm gonna show you how to turn a circle into a sphere just by using proper line direction and shading techniques that don't require smudging. Smudging is awful and super lazy. Okay, so are you ready?
All right, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna point your pinky knuckle and put it in the center of your paper. You're gonna hold your pencil at an angle, and then you're just going to spin your paper around. The only things that should be touching your paper are your pinky knuckle and your pencil. It's easier if you try and do this standing up so that your hand is not wanting to rest on the paper. So don't forget, your pinky knuckle is gonna go in the center and then your pencil on the outside. So here it is at a different angle. The only thing touching your paper is a pinky knuckle and your pencil. So again, make sure your hand's elevated. So pinky knuckle and pencil, that's it. Rotate your paper, and if you're putting enough pressure on your pinky knuckle, you'll create a perfect circle. So now that you have your perfect circle, you are going to draw two straight lines, one on either side of the circle. That is going to create the table. Then you're going to draw the shadow, and don't forget your light source, okay? When you have your light source put in place, it helps you so that you know where the light is going, and the light will bounce off of the table and reflect onto the sphere. So please make sure that you take that into account when you are shading. When you are shading, you want to make sure that your line direction is round, it's curved lines. If you need help, you can do what I'm doing here by drawing these super light guidelines. And this is just to help you remember that when you are shading, your lines need to be round. On the table, on the other hand, the table is flat. And so is the shadow, because shadows are not objects that are tangible that you can touch. Shadows happen when there is an absence of light and they are on an object. So since the shadow is on the table, you are also going to shade the shadow with flat, straight lines. Now, when you are looking at your sphere, it does have this little crescent shape that is the super dark shadow. So when you go to shade it in, you kind of want to follow along with those lines that you drew for the crescent shape, but that's not accurate. So with those guidelines, it will help you make sure that your lines are going in the right direction. Your lines need to be constantly going around and around and around. They need to be curved and be round like the circle. The guidelines are extremely helpful, but please make sure that you draw them super light so that they don't impede the actual drawing. So what you're going to do is you're going to shade in that super dark part, and then you're going to go in and you're going to layer different layers of pencil. So I did the first layer of the underneath of the shadow super light, and I went over it again. Now I'm doing the same concept where I'm going to go throughout wherever I know that it's going to be dark, and I'm going to do a layer, and then I'm going to keep layering and keep layering and keep layering. The reason that you're layering is so that there is not a need to smudge, okay? Because when you're smudging, it looks fuzzy and it looks sloppy and it looks really lazy. So when you are trying to get those areas and make sure that they have really high definition and they look really crisp and clean, you're going to want to do layers, just layers and layers and layers. And if you notice, I move my hand up and down the pencil, and that's because when you are trying to do a light portion, then you need to move your hand up to the top of the pencil by the eraser, so you are not putting as much pressure on the pencil, and it is actually giving you lighter values. And if you think about the value scale starts with white at the top and black on the bottom. And so if you want to move up on the value scale, you need to move up on the pencil. Okay, so I'm continuing with doing round curved lines, and I'm just going to follow those guidelines that I had drawn. So now I'm just trying to complete the sphere with those round lines. Now, when we're looking at this, you can see it looks kind of stripy because you can see the lines and the values are not 100% accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over all of the areas again with another layer of pencil. And that's all this really is just layering and making sure that your line direction is round. If your line direction is not round, your sphere is not going to look like a sphere. If you have straight lines, it's going to look flat, even if you have the accurate values there. So you need to make sure that you're adding that extra oomph and you're doing round curved lines, okay? And don't forget, if you need lighter values, then you need to move up on your pencil. All right, so I added those other layers right there and it looks way better. So now I'm going to finish adding those layers everywhere else throughout the sphere. And when I notice that I get kind of bored in an area, I'll kind of move around a lot and I'll move somewhere else, and that's totally fine. You don't have to stay in one area if you're kind of bored of it. But just continue layering and continue adding all of those layers super lightly. You do not want to be pressing hard except for in the dark areas, because if you press really hard and you're like, oh no, it's too dark, now I have to erase it, sometimes the lead will stain the paper and you can't really fully erase it. So just continue adding those layers, and when you're doing the layers, you need to keep up with your curved round lines. So, as you can see, when I am going over this with my pencil, I am blending and blending and blending. And when I'm trying to do the light areas, I actually move up on my pencil. When I do the dark areas, see, I moved down on my pencil. And remember, I know I already said this, but the value scale, white is at the top, black is at the bottom. So when you are moving up in the value scale, you're going to move up on your pencil. So darker values, you're going to be down at the bottom of your pencil like this, and the lighter values, you're going to be closer to the eraser. And so that just helps people make sure that they're using the correct amount of pressure. Some people don't need to do that. Some people can use their hand at the very bottom of their pencil and just ease up on their pressure using their wrist. But other people are super heavy-handed and they cannot do that. So a technique that I learned that I am sharing with you is to just move your hand towards the eraser for the lighter values. So now here I am. I've already gone over the entire sphere once, and now I'm going over again, darkening up those areas that I know need to be darker. And then I'm just going through and I'm blending. And the way that the blending works without smudging, without using a blending stump or a paper towel or your finger or a tissue, is that you already have that layer of pencil laid down. So when you're going over it again with another layer of pencil, it actually smudges it for you because it is pushing that first layer of pencil around and it is blending that second layer of pencil with it. So you just go over it again and again, lightly with the layers, and then until you get it to the value that you want. But when you are shading, please do not forget that you need to be using proper line direction throughout this entire time. So I know that the initial drawing has round curved lines, and then when you're like, all right, well, I already have my first base of my values, now I just kind of am like, done, I'm bored, I'm sick of it, I just want to like shade it in. Well, as soon as you put a straight line on top of that, all we're going to see is the straight line, and it's not going to make sense. So for the shadow, there's this thing called reflected light, and so basically the light shines down onto the table, reflects back up onto the sphere, and then reflects back down onto the table. So there is a portion of the shadow that is lighter than the other portions of the shadow. So that's what I'm kind of drawing here, and I'm just darkening it up because it's still a shadow, so it still needs to be dark, but it does need to be slightly lighter. So that's kind of what I was doing right there. And again, just doing those layers, layer, layer, layer. And I'm just erasing those lines so that they're not in the final drawing. So table flat. You need to use flat horizontal lines, just like you did for the shadow, because again, shadow is not an object. The table is the object. So we're just doing flat lines, flat, straight, horizontal lines, super boring. And I just took my eraser right there and kind of went dab, dab, dab to pick up any of the excess pencil. So just finishing up the table and adding another layer, try and blend those lines and also clean up edges, soften the edge of the shadow so it's not so harsh, and add a little bit of lighter values there. Now I'm just darkening up everywhere that I feel like needs to be darkened, adding just another layer, trying to blend and smudge again without actually smudging. And basically now what I'm doing is I'm going through and I am trying to get every single value exactly the way I need it. So if it needs to be darker, I'm making it darker. And while I am doing that, I am continuing to use those round curved lines. So don't forget about that, okay? That's super important. Even when it's like all done, if you do not have the proper line direction, it is not gonna look accurate. It's gonna look weird, okay? So now what you need to do is go in between all of the lines that you've made and kind of fill those in, fill those gaps in so it doesn't look so stripy, and make sure it looks smoother, kind of like an actual object instead of a drawn object. But even though it's kind of time consuming and tedious, it's totally worth it in the end, because just trust me, it is.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. Leave a comment down below with your questions. And if you have any suggestions for any other kinds of videos that you want to watch that are art related, then also leave those suggestions down below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.